go to deal with the issues you want to deal with. And to the extent that you may want to refer us to any of the documents or statements in the bundle, you may do so, just indicating what page, and if there is a paragraph number, what paragraph number. But otherwise, feel free and you may start.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Mzwanele Manyi, and I'm addressing this commission in my capacity as the former CEO of GCIS. Yeah.
Yes, you can continue. And you have been prompted to give this evidence in reaction to the evidence that was given by Ms. Pumla Williams. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairperson. I'm here on two accounts. The one account is really on the direction of the commission, call it a subpoena, to talk to the text that I had sent to Pumla. And I kindly requested the people I was dealing with, Chairperson, that in order to be more efficient, that could I not use that opportunity to also deal with the rest of what Ms. Williams had to say. And the team agreed that I do that. So today, I'm hoping to do both things, to deal with Ms. Williams's testimony, and at the same time incorporate the text message, which is also consolidated in my submission.
Okay. Is what you are telling me now any different from what you told me before lunch in terms of what you want to cover in your evidence?
No.
It is still the same?
Exactly the same, Chair.
Okay, all right. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. So, Chairperson, I think in terms of the, I'm going to start with Mr. Pumla Williams' testimony. In her affidavit, the areas that deal specifically with me are paragraph 14 and paragraph 2 paragraph 16 specifically.
Did you say 14 and 16?
14 to 16.
Oh, 14 to 16.
14 to 16 are the paragraphs that have got the direct allegations, so to speak, that are leveled at me. But then I just thought, Chair, that with your indulgence, Chairperson, if you allow me, that before I get to paragraph 14 and 15, I also deal with paragraph 12 and 13 as a build-up to that, so that everything is in proper context.
That's fine.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chairperson, the first point I want to make on paragraph 12 relates to basically when Themba Maseko left, which has a direct impact on when I arrived, because everybody knows it's the same day. And when Ms. Williams was here, she made statements about January, that Themba would have left in January, and so on. And there was a lot of discussion around that. So I just want to place it on record, Chairperson, that is not true. In the first instance, Themba would have left the department, left GCIS.
That's Mr. Maseko, huh?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Chairperson. It's somebody I know very well. Yeah. Mr. Maseko left GCIS on the 3rd of February. And this is very important, Chairperson, because the events of January 2011 in GCIS is not something I want to be associated with. So it must be very clear that what happened in January, all the transgressions I'm going to go through here, that happened in January, happened long before I even knew I was ever going to be a GCIS. So there's context to what happened. So that's the first point. Then I just thought...
Maybe just so that I follow, you said Ms. Williams said you came in, or you said she said Mr. Maseko left GCIS in January.
She said Mr. Maseko left GCIS in January, and then it was also said here that I came in the same day. It was
Yes.
explained here within hours.
Yes,
So
yeah.
therefore, by
Yeah.
inference, I would have also therefore arrived in January.
Yeah.
It's not
yeah.
true.
Okay, so you are saying you came in, or he left, that is Mr. Masego, you say he left on the 3rd of February?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I interacted with him on that date, Chair, on the 3rd of February.
Okay.
I do put in my statement here that he had given, on the 2nd of February was a cabinet meeting. And if people can go through the diary of 2011, 2nd of February, we'll find it's a Wednesday, which is a normal cabinet day. And then on Thursday, it was a cabinet the press briefing, which Mr. Masego was leading. After that press briefing, I had a chat with him outside at union buildings. At the time, they were doing press briefings at the union buildings. So I had a chat with him briefly just to say, okay, hand over, what do we do? And he was actually in a rush to go to DPSA at the time. So I did not pursue him any further. He said, just go and you'll find the team there, which is exactly what I did. And just in case there was any doubt on what I'm saying, Chairperson, I've actually prepared a statement, an exhibit here, which I've called RA1, which is in the bundle. And this exhibit is the cabinet statement, which is dated the 3rd of February. And at the end of that cabinet statement...
I'm sorry, in this bundle, what page is it? Or is it not included there?
It is included, Chairperson. It's just that I did my own preparation last night.
Okay, all right. Have you got copies of the one you have prepared separately, or you don't?
Chair, if I may assist.
Yes.
RA1 is pages 26
Page 26.
and 27
Okay.
of Exhibit M.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I would request, Chair, that through you, Mr. Malega, to continue with this kind of assistance. I will be mentioning these various exhibits. If you can just keep the pages, I would really be appreciate
Yes,
that.
no, I'm sure he will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So Exhibit 1 for me, that RA is for response affidavit. So for my Exhibit 1 is exactly what he has pointed out to. This is a cabinet statement, so I think they should put to bed any discussion about when is it that Mr. Maseko left. There's concrete evidence right here. So that's the first thing. The second...
I'm sorry. So this statement refers to a cabinet meeting of the 2nd of February.
Yes.
Would it have been issued on the same day or the following day?
The following day, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was issued on the 3rd of February for a meeting that happened the day before on the 2nd.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Right, so that's the first thing. The second thing, Chairperson,
I had got the impression from Mr. Masego's evidence that he left GCIS on the same day on which there was a cabinet meeting. To the extent that he may have said that, you are suggesting that may not be correct.
it's impossible, Chairperson.
Yes.
Because here's a statement.
Yeah.
And I've played this role as well, I would know, that you have a cabinet meeting and you prepare that statement the whole night, the following day you table the statement. So here's a statement tabled on the 3rd.
I did understand that his evidence was to the fact that he was involved in the preparation of the statement that would talk about the cabinet meeting, but I was under the impression that the statement, that he was suggesting that the statement was issued on the same day, but I may have made a mistake. But your point is simply that it was issued the following day.
He actually read it the following
Yes.
day,
Thank
not
you.
just issued, he tabled it. And I'm sure people from the media that are here would vouch to that. They ask questions and so on. But
Okay.
he tabled it at the union building. That's how I met him. Usually when you issue it, there's not even a press briefing. You just issue it electronically, and then that's it.
Yeah.
This time around, we were at the union buildings on the 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the first point, Chair. And then the next thing.
But I want to hear more about your conversation with him. You have referred to a conversation with him when you say he was in a hurry to go to DPSA. Was this on the Wednesday, on Thursday,
Yes,
after the cabinet meeting?
Yes, Chairperson, it was on Thursday,
And was it after the press briefing?
after the press briefing.
Okay, so the two of you did talk about, at that day, about the fact that he was leaving the GCIS and you were going to GCIS.
Yeah, on that day, yes, we had a brief chat, and really, I think we knew that, we knew, Chairperson, I would have known maybe a day or so before that
That you were
I'm deployed to
Yes.
to GCIS.
Yes.
And then we had a brief chat, and then he was saying he was going to DPSA.
Yeah. Okay, if you are going to address this later, it's fine, you can deal with it later, but if you were not planning to address it, maybe you can deal with it now. I would like to know when you got to know that you were being moved to GCIS and what were the circumstances under which you were told that. So you can deal with it immediately if you want to, or
Yes,
later
Chair.
if you
I
want
can deal
to.
with it right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think, Chairperson, now that the date was the 3rd of February, it would have been a few days before that. I just don't remember the exact times. It was a few days before that, not more than 5 days before that. Not more than 5 days before that, where Minister Chabane, the late Minister Chabane, we had a meeting, and we actually met at Protea Hotel in Midrand. In fact, Chairperson, I remember very well, he actually proposed, I chose to do this role. He gave me 2 options. At the time, this was the one position that was open, the other, or rather that he was putting forward for me to consider. The other position was a COO position in the presidency. And the reason I decided on this position is because at the time, the COO position was grade 15. Now, I was already grade 16, being a DG of labor. So it didn't make sense to me to opt for a grade lower. So I then opted for the GCIS position because it was horizontal move. So that's what happened. So we had a chat there, and then he said, well, if I choose that one, so that's it. So his issue was to fill one of the 2 positions, and I had the first bite at the chair in terms of deciding which one. So that's really what then happened. And yeah.
Did you say why, or rather, let me put it this way, had you asked to be moved from the position of DG of labor elsewhere?
No.
In other words, his approach to you, was it in response to any request made by you or wish to be moved from the position of DG, Department of Labor?
No, Chairperson, it was not. I had not requested to be moved to that position, but there was a situation that I think government was dealing with, because at the time, at the Department of Labor, we had some kind of a fallout with the minister at the time. In fact, I was on precautionary, on special leave.
Suspension.
Yeah, no,
special
well, it started as a precautionary leave, and it graded into a special leave and all that. So I was at home.
Okay. So there was a certain situation that needed to be dealt with,
Yes.
Which affected the working relationship between yourself and the minister in your department at the time.
Yes, Chairperson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And then this approach from him, you saw as an approach to try and deal with that situation.
Yes. I thought it was a resolution to because I've been at home for a couple of months, a few months actually. And so when this came, I said, oh, well, because even for that, without going into that detail, I never got really charged into a disciplinary process and whatever, and so on. It was something that was about to happen, going to happen. Months rolled by. I was sitting and preparations was being made to do all kinds of charges, but bottom line is that I don't sit with a guilty verdict or having said and being dealt with by DC. So while that process was busy, rolling and so on, I think sanity prevailed from where I sit, and then I had to move on.
And can you just speak more about the conversation between yourself and Minister Chabane when he came with this suggestion? Just tell us more about that conversation.
Chairperson, this would have happened in 2011. This is now 2018. So
yeah, no. What you can't remember, you can't remember.
Yeah.
You know.
No. All. Minister Chabane is not a man of many words, Chairperson. He comes and he's just very telegraphic. He just has a job to do. He does that. He's not a long-winded kind of person. He came and said, Chief, let's sit, let's talk, and then ordered some cold drinks. And then he says, look, I have two positions for you to consider. This one or this one. What is your choice?
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't even get to the second glass of drinks, Chairperson. The
Okay.
meeting was over.
Okay, yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. You may continue.
Okay. So that was that part. And then, Chairperson, on paragraph 13 of Ms. Williams's input or testimony. Statements. She talks about the changes I made. Yes, indeed, Chairperson, I did make some very dramatic changes. And in fact, I think it was my duty as an accounting officer to give expression to the substance and the letter of Section 38 of PFMA. So I come into a department because at the end of the day, I'm going to be accountable. Everything is going to be on my head. So therefore, I think the issue of making the changes, it's the right thing to do. One of the things that I spearheaded in changing was a vision statement, Chairperson. I found a paragraph-long preamble of sorts for a vision statement, which no one could remember. By the way, I would stop people and say, what is a vision of GCIS? No one would be able to remember. So I just took the view that if you don't even know the vision of the organization, how can you get yourself to work towards it? So the first thing, we went to a straight session to change the vision into something that is memorable, that is, can rally people together to say this is where we're headed. So we ended up with a vision statement that says that is to be the pulse of communication excellence in government. That vision statement still stands today, Chairperson, and is rallying the teams together. And indeed, one of the changes I also brought in is a do-it-now culture. I'm that kind of a person. If something must be done, it must be done here and now, not this tomorrow. So that is my culture. It doesn't start today, Chairperson. I found a situation at GCIS where, typical government culture, so to speak, that characterizes government of not delivering quickly. A simple thing of moving out tray from your own out tray to somebody's in tray 5 steps away. I'm not over-dramatizing this, Chairperson, when I say that would not move without a mailman coming to move that out tray and 5 steps away to drop it off to the in tray of another. That's what was happening when I arrived there. So those are the things that I changed. By way, for example, as well, as I conclude on some of these changes that I brought in there that would have created some kind of a culture shock. When I arrived there, there was an auditorium, Chairperson, that was underutilized, almost redundant. Then I converted that within 2 weeks. We were able to convert that auditorium into a press briefing session with all kinds of video linkages between Pretoria and Cape Town. My very first briefing 2 weeks later, was in that auditorium, Chairperson. So this is a kind of do it now culture that I introduced when we got there. So that's by way of introduction. And just lastly, even the issue of the payment of suppliers, we were priding ourselves at GCIS that we're the one department that had the best of the turnarounds. When I left, I know for a fact that the July report 2012 will show that we were able to pay suppliers within 14 days, because this was not complicated, Chairperson. A person submits an invoice. If the person submits an invoice, all we've got to do is to check if work was done to that invoice. That's not complicated to establish whether that work was done or not to the right quality and standard. That can take more than 2 weeks, honestly, for anything. So that gets done, and then within 2 weeks, the person is done, and you don't go on workshop instead of paying people's invoices and so on. So I established that culture of people understanding that not everybody is on a monthly salary, that there are entrepreneurs out there that are dependent on those invoices being paid on time. So we did that at GCIS, and very proud to say that we really did very well for the people that were doing business with GCIS. I then moved to paragraph 14, Chairperson. Then I deal specifically with some of the allegations about changing the bid committee. Did I change the bid committee? Did I dismantle the bid committee? Yes, I did. Do I apologize for that? Definitely not. So why did I do this? So the background is this, Chairperson. When I arrived, I indeed reappointed Ms. Williams in the same position to chair the bid committee. This is on my arrival. And that for me is a demonstration that I didn't go there with any agenda. I came there to maintain smooth operations, smooth running of things. So if Pumla was chairing and I'm not aware of anything going wrong, so Pumla continued to chair. The issue that came about was then the realization, somehow it got to my attention, that something has gone horribly wrong in the procurement space, where, Chairperson, there was an irregular appointment of a particular service provider. Now, that on its own cost the government just under 7 million in terms of money that government lost in that process. And I found the collaboration of bid adjudication committee members and procurement members, that whole team, somehow they had a very elaborate scheme of doing this thing, a typical mini VBS, Chairperson, if I could call it that, which I will explain a bit later just now. That's a situation I found. That situation was untenable. There was no way any accounting officer would have left that thing unattended. So that is the reason, chief reason why I had to change that bid committee. We then appointed, I then, on realization of this, I said to the chief internal auditor, just report this to all the authorities available. And the chief internal auditor went and reported this matter everywhere. It was reported with the SIU, Special Investigating Unit, and also to the Auditor General. After those reports, but still not much was coming out because people have got all their various protocols and so on. So we ended up at the end, cutting the long story short, with the Statistician General, because this service provider was meant to do some project which had to do with Census 2011. So the whole thing about the campaign, awareness campaign and so on, to popularize Census 2011. This is what this is about. So in that mix, the appointment of the, and I'll go to details about that just now, the appointment of that service provider was irregular to the extreme. And and together with the Statistician General, we then agreed to appoint National Treasury to do a thorough investigation of this matter, having reported to the other two authorities. So we gave National Treasury 4 key areas to look at. One was whether the process followed in acquiring service providers for the Census 2011 projects was followed, whether services, what services were service providers were they procured for, whether or not there was value for money to the state in the supplied services, whether the project was conducted in accordance with the memo between States SA and GCIS. So those are the 4 key areas that we wanted probed. I must pause at this point and point out that all this calamity happened in the presence and with the participation of the people that Ms. Williams was giving a glowing CV of here, that they were competent and committed. They had all kinds of training. They had a 5-day training with National Treasury. They are committed, the CFO. It ticked all the boxes. But despite ticking all the boxes, there was corruption and fraud with a lot of them implicated in that. So that was the situation that transpired there. So I then had to unbundle that bid adjudication committee. And then, Chairperson, I just want to take you through some of the findings. What I'm going to go through here is not me saying this, it's the National Treasury report. They made findings, so there's no Manyi input here. It's exactly as it is. I've got the report here, but I have just paraphrased it here, but it's almost word for word, as it were, Chairperson. The first point that National Treasury makes is that the company that was appointed, despite the fact that it was registered in 2009, in December 2009, they make a very interesting observation that on the 3rd of January 2011, there were 3 directors that came into this company. They make a specific reference to this point. And then they make a very interesting observation again to say, when these directors came in, 3 days later, basically, this company was then, which is on the 6th of January, then this company was already in the system with GCIS. Now, on the 6th of January, when the interaction started with this company and GCIS, the 7th of January, that interaction was approved, and so on. So on the 6th, so National Treasury makes these dates very interestingly. They say on the 3rd, these 3 directors come in. On the 6th, the first interaction with GCIS happens basically. On the 7th, there's a payment notice that is signed off to approve payment, a commissioning of some 26 million rand project happened just the very next day. And they make very interesting observations, findings, Chairperson. The first one is that the person that signed this payment notice was Ms. Pumla Williams. And National Treasury finds that, in fact, in terms of the financial delegations of GCIS, she was not delegated to do this. So strictly speaking, her signing this thing was on its own irregular. They go on to make all kinds of findings that you needed to have had a bid specification committee in the first place. So even that was not put into place. Then they make list of the contraventions that were entered into by GCIS, that even the Constitution, Section 217, that deals with procurement, was contravened. They also mentioned that Section 38 of the PFMA, which means that an accounting officer must put in processes in place, all of those were contravened, where the country commission needed to make sure that the provisioning system for procurement is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. That was not in place. They also mentioned that the GCIS contravened paragraph 4.9 of the National Treasury Supply Chain Management, and so on. They also mentioned that the GCIS contravened Treasury Regulation 16A6.A, paragraph A, in that no bid adjudication process took place as required. They go on, Chairperson, about these transgressions, that the appointment of the service provider was not supported by an appointment letter which outlined the scope of work as well as deliverables expected from the service provider. Now, at that point, Chairperson, I want to point out to Exhibit RA2. This is the only piece of paper that commissioned this project, which was like 26 million. This is all there is to it. No,
Mr. Maleka, do you know where we find that one? You don't know.
I don't have a copy of the report,
Okay.
but the testimony of Mr. Manyi on these transgressions
Yeah, okay.
begin at page 11.
page 28. It's on page 28, Chairperson.
Sorry?
It's on page 28.
28, oh,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Page 28.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Unless
Mr.
I have a different record,
That's not what you have on 28.
I picked them up from page 11, going to page 13. In fact, they end at page 14, paragraph 12.
What are you looking for there, Mr. Malaga?
The testimony of Mr. Manyi talking about what he found when he got to GCIS, the mini VBS saga he's talking about.
Oh,
All of that is explained as I have it
yeah.
from page 11.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. He's dealing with a specific document, which he says is at page 28, and it looks like what I have at page 28 is what he's talking about.
Yes, Chairperson.
Marked Exhibit RA2.
Yes, Chairperson.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is the exhibit. This is the only piece of document that constituted the engagement of GCIS and this particular service provider. None of this had anything about deliverables, anything at all. This is all there was to it, and which was also signed by a person who's not even delegated to do that. So that's what was happening, the Chairperson. And as I'm saying, these are the findings of National Treasury. This is not me being very intelligent and finding out these things. Treasury also noted that the service provider of GCIS was appointed despite not being registered on the supplier database. Now, these are all the Rolls-Royce team that is doing this, that had ticked all the boxes. But look at what National Treasury has found. No evidence was found to indicate that the service provider was even screened by GCIS prior to their appointment and all that. So, and these are things that happened in January, Chairperson. I must make this very clear. That's why I want to stay away from January. These are things that happened before I arrived. This must be very clear. This is all the things that happened before I arrived. Treasury noted that the registration document was signed on the 8th of January, and the registration captured on the 14th of January, after the appointment of the service provider. So it was, Chairperson, every rule that could be broken was broken in this thing. And then National Treasury also notes that notwithstanding that services had not yet been rendered, but an invoice dated 10th of February was submitted by the service provider to GCIS. So it goes on like that, Chairperson, to illustrate that the whole onboarding of this service provider was really a monumental disaster, as it were. But,
how much in financial terms did you say was involved with this?
I said under 7 million, Chairperson. The actual number is 6,983,460.02 cents.
6 million?
6.9.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's going to go up just now, Chairperson.
And that 26 million on that document?
That 26 million in that document was the total project, if it had gone on. But it was stopped dead on its tracks at some point. It was stopped at 6.9 million. Otherwise, it was headed for 26 million.
Okay.
So somewhere it got interrupted, and when the investigation started, and everything was stopped.
Okay.
So the amount lost by the time it got stopped was just around 7 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I must hasten to say then, Chairperson, that all this was in the empire of Ms. Williams, because what she had done, the Chairperson, all supply chain reported to her. The CFO reported to her. The Chief Internal Auditor reported to her. So everything was right here, and so on. No checks and balances, nothing, and so on. So that's a situation that was happening there. And it goes on, Chairperson, National Treasury did a good job in terms of doing this investigation. National Treasury also found that the supply chain officials advised the service provider to break up the invoice. This is fraud. So what they would do, Chairperson, is that because if you have to pay anything over $1 million, that attracts National Treasury attention. So therefore, all other things need to be in place. So in order to avoid that, so what they would then do is to advise the service provider to bill less than $1 million, just so that it can go under the radar, and so on. So that's how this 6 million was, 7 million was paid in 7 different invoices, as it were. So
like each invoice would be under $1 million,
yes,
but then you'd have many invoices instead of, even when you could have had just one invoice or two.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah. If, for instance, for that piece of work, for argument's sake, was 1.5 million, and then you say, okay, just divide that by 2. Let's make it 750 kind of thing, and then it goes under the radar and nobody sees. So that's what happens. And that has got quite implications, Chairperson, because then what then happens is that when you do that, in terms of the government prescripts, the person that gets red carded is the accounting officer, because the prescripts are all routed around the accounting officer. Then the law is going to say accounting officer did not do this, yet you've got officials on the ground that are busy fiddling with the system, that are busy cutting corners, circumventing processes and all that. So that's a situation. And I want to underscore this point, Chairperson, that this happened, and later I will say why these dates are important. These invoices were paid between the 7th of March and the 23rd of March. So that whole 7 million was paid, and I will get to why that is important. Now, of great concern, Chairperson, which was also found by National Treasury. National Treasury found that when they were doing interviews one of the people that they interviewed said the issue of splitting of invoices was actually common practice at GCIS. And then that this person that they were interviewing said she had requested suppliers to split invoices on numerous occasions in order to ensure prompt payment. And she said the practice was never rectified or brought to her attention as being irregular. So for me, that is a great concern, and I think somewhere I make a recommendation to the Commission that I think more must go into how many of these split invoices would have happened even before January 2011. If this official is saying, what's the problem here? This is normal practice and so on in GCIS. So how many millions have been irregularly dispensed with using this irregular method, as it were? There's another supplier around the same time of the same project, a chairperson, that also got paid under exact similar conditions and so on, about 777,000 to this supplier. So the total amount paid irregularly for this project was something like 7,761,215.9. So that is the number, 7,761,215.9. That's a total amount that was paid irregularly, as it were. National Treasury recommended disciplinary actions on various identified individuals which were at the forefront of the scam, and also that fraud cases must be opened. So, Chairperson, I have not detailed the list of people here because my intention coming here was not to reopen this investigation, so to speak. I'm just here just to mention it as an example of what happened. So due processes did take place to deal with it by way of National Treasury, and further investigations are happening and so on. So I did not want to put people's names here when they might be in other processes, as it were, but bottom line is that this is the kind of rot that got me to say, up to here, no further. I must dismantle this Rolls-Royce and so on. Further to that point, Chairperson, we also, as National Treasury also found that there were actually 3 service providers, Chairperson, that were involved with this. 2 service providers were appointed by GCIS irregularly. The 1 service provider was appointed by States SA, but I think the appointment might have been correct, might have been regular. But the issue here is that States SA service provider, the duty of that provider was to supply artwork for these other 2 to do whatever they needed to do. And that did not happen. But that service provider, Chairperson, was paid 64 million for work not delivered. So States SA paid a whooping 64 million to a service provider whose work was never delivered at GCIS, and these 2 were blaming that service provider and so on. So I also make a recommendation that I think the Commission must look into that 64 million. And I must also say then here, Chairperson, that as much as National Treasury did a good job, but I was somewhat disappointed by the lack of enthusiasm by National Treasury to follow on that 64 million. They just say in the report, Chairperson, that they tried to find the supplier did not return the call. They just left it at that, 64 million. And yet National Treasury has got a duty in terms of the constitution of this country to run and ensure that the financial affairs of government are where they should be. Now, if National Treasury is aware that there is 64 million on somebody who we've got evidence on the other side that the services that they were procured for were not actually delivered, but you don't find any enthusiasm to chase behind that 64 million. So I'm very worried and nervous about the attitude of National Treasury in that specific aspect. I proceed, Chairperson.
Well, I'm just concerned about 64 million rand being paid for work that was never done. And we all know that that we do hear stories of contractors getting paid for work that has not been done, or incomplete work, or work of very poor quality. And obviously where this is based on corrupt intentions, even from within government departments, maybe that is something that can happen. But I wonder whether some of these things happen in circumstances where from the government departments it's just incompetence, whether we could be having incompetence of that level, or whether it's just always that everyone involved has corrupt intentions.
Well, Chairperson, I think we're fortunate that we have a commission to investigate corruption and state capture. For me, this is the grand corruption and classical state capture, where you have very intelligent people. Everybody that is involved, they are all graduates. Typical VBS, everybody here, they are all intelligent, educated people. But somehow, monies of government get lost, and nobody takes accountability. People produce reports, and that's it. They tick a box, report is done, but nobody is brought to book. As we sit here now, Chairperson, I'm not aware of anybody that has really accounted for this thing. This report by National Treasury, I must point out, Chairperson, that it was made available on the 1st of November 2012, this report. I had left GCIS in August, so it came out after I had left. So from where I sit, I personally could not do anything about it because I was outside the public service, or rather outside government. Yeah, so as to what happened since 2012 until now is the issue that people must respond to, because that 64 million is a lot of money. And I do know that with the 6 million, 7 million or so of GCIS, there were certain court cases, and the court also ruled that that procurement was also irregular and null and void and what have you. So that's what the court even ruled on that matter. And therefore, GCIS had the duty to chase up that money from that service provider. So maybe the current leadership of GCIS must respond to where the process is in terms of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, Chairperson, before I then proceed, I've been struggling also. That's why I also asked for condonation to submit my affidavit late. I've been struggling to get a lot of information from GCIS. This report I've just referred to, I want to place it on record, I struggled to get it. In fact, the acting CEO, acting DG of GCIS refused in writing to give me this report and all that. I had to get the minister to appeal to the minister to get this report. If it was not for the minister, I would not have got this report. They had come up with all kinds of fancy footing about why I should not get this and so on and so on. But when I pointed out to the minister that this report contains a lot of fraudulent activities, the minister rose to the occasion and ordered them to give me this report. Still, as they were giving this report, as you could see that they were doing it half-heartedly. They gave the report, and then they don't give the attachments that go with the report. I struggled to get the attachments for this report. In fact, some of the attachments I only got last night as I was coming here. Then they gave me the attachments of that report, and I did not even get a chance to submit them to the team. They only came last night. Now, the important thing, Chairperson, which I want to place on record in terms of that, is that one of the attachments makes reference to a memo that was actually authored by Pumla herself. It's a pity that the team now will be disadvantaged because they don't have this, but I will leave it here. Maybe we can deal with it on the 23rd or whatever. But on this memo, it's a very elaborate memo that talks to how we should procure, seeks to regularize the deviations of procuring bulk. Indeed, to procure bulk buying, it's not your straightforward procurement. You need special dispensation. Now, this report, Chairperson, this memo, sanitizes everything that would have been procured from 2010, September somewhere, to end of March. Now, it so happens that all these shenanigans happened in that period. Now we have a memo here that the Bid Adjudication Committee says they quote all chapter and verse of the regulations they have followed and what have you, that they have followed in order to comply with the regulations and everything else, why we should allow this deviation. Got submitted to me for noting. So I noted this, and then they show a list of things of suppliers, up to, it's a 50 million suppliers that needed this kind of a deviation in there. Now, the interesting thing, Chairperson, about this submission now, and I want you to go to, on record, is Exhibit 26 on the actual National Treasury report, is Exhibit 26. On this Exhibit 26, which I only got last night, the list of companies that were needed to be excused, the one was blanked out. One of the companies was blacked out. Now, I was very curious to say, what is this blacking out now? I take this, Chairperson, to sunlight. You know, outside I go into the sun, and I looked at this carefully. And I found that this 6 million, 9 is that company that has been blacked out. Now, I don't understand what kind of mischief is this, as it were. That is it because now it's becoming clear to me that this report was a whitewash. This memo was a strategy to whitewash. At some point, when GCIS officials are asked to account, they're going to bring this and say, but no, this was corrected. Now, this was done in March 2011, and I signed this thing in May 2011 and all that. Now, when it came to my attention, it came to me the recommendation to say the Bid Adjudication Committee has looked at the presentation, has endorsed, that's the words used, as endorsed, and we want the CEO to note. Now, Chairperson, there are three things that you do when you sit in a position of authority in government. You approve, you decline, you note. So, and that has got different levels of scrutiny. When you are given something to approve, you don't rush that thing. You sit down and you make sure that all the wheels and bells are where they should be. And you either approve or decline. When I'm given something to note, it's a heads up that the people with the appropriate mandate have actually approved the thing. You are just being kept in the loop. Just be aware that we're doing this. So I got this thing to note, but I see on the Treasury report, they've noted my noting as a ratification now, which is another matter. And by the way, when National Treasury was interviewing the people that they were interviewing, I was never interviewed by National Treasury. I really thought that, lawyers have got this thing, Chairperson, that you know more than all of us here, that audi alta parem patem, that surely I should have been given a right to respond. Manyi, why did you note this? Or if they want to upgrade my noting to a ratification, give me an opportunity. They didn't even do that. But if it was not for this commission, I wouldn't have known that in that report, National Treasury has said I've ratified things, which I have not ratified. I noted this thing was approved by the Bid Adjudication Committee. But anyway, I place it on record as a memo that is created, in my view, for posterity measures, so that in future somebody says, no, but this thing was the crime happened in January. Then you get this thing noted in May, and no direct link to the activity in January. There's a host of transactions that are there. So if you are sitting as an accounting officer, you don't know all of these projects, that this one means this. You're just looking at the principle, and the principle here that are presented with is a principle that says, CEO, we as the Bid Adjudication Committee were presented with this memo, and things need to happen this way in terms of regulation this, in terms of circular this. As the Bid Adjudication Committee, we are endorsing this. Please note. So I note, but somehow Treasury has upgraded that to a ratification. So I want to place on record that National Treasury, I don't think they acted particularly correct in this regard. But I note in passing. I proceed, Chairperson. One of the other things I also noted in this arrangement with this Bid Adjudication Committee was something which I call conflict of interest, whereby line managers that were responsible to issue tenders for various of their requirements would be the exact same physical beings, same people that would be sitting at the Bid Adjudication Committee. So I had a problem with this, that this is too much a conflict system. So that's another reason I decided that no, this is just so wrong. Line managers must not be in this Bid Adjudication Committee. Let me get people that don't run budgets. Because, Chairperson, the main thing you do at the Bid Adjudication Committee is to oversee what the Bid Evaluation Committee would have done as it was. So the technical grind really happens at the bid evaluation level. At an adjudication level, you check policies were correct, processes were followed. You know, it's an overseeing body, as it were. Now, to find people that are overseeing projects of their, call it acquaintances, for lack of a better term, because what happens, Chairperson, truth of the matter is that if you are running a particular line function, you develop relationships with various service providers. Now, if you've developed these relationships with various service providers, and then again, you, the same person, must sit and adjudicate with people that you've been very casual with, it's a problem for me at least here. So I just thought that's another reason. Lastly, Chairperson, I also looked at the length of stay of these people in this Bid Adjudication Committee. You know, Chairperson, that Pumla Williams has been in the Bid Adjudication Committee for 10 years. Can you believe this? 10 years. Now, if I look at the members of this, not only her, there's about at least 3 of them that were 10 years in this committee. Others were 6 years in this committee and all that. So what you have here, Chairperson, you have people that have got no freshness, people that are very vulnerable to corruption because everybody knows who is in the Bid Adjudication Committee. So understanding how corruption works in this country, what better place to be than to be dealing with a place where you know exactly who is going to be in the Bid Adjudication Committee. So that was another reason that I thought, no, time for a change and all that. So indeed, Chairperson, those were the reasons. I mean, these people that had 10 years, 5 years in this Bid Adjudication Committee, the splitting of invoices, the flouting of policies, the fraudulent activities happened under their watch. with all the experience that they had here. So, yeah, I just thought, Chairperson, that to dismantle this was the right thing to do, which even today, I actually do not apologize for it. I think it was a right decision to do that. And I must also just underline the fact that even the Chief Audit Executive was also mired into this division of corporate services. So it was just terrible conflict. So I dismantled it. I proceed, Chairperson, to paragraph 16 of my presentation.
We are at about 6 or 7 minutes to 4. We normally stop at 4.
Oh.
I'm just wanting to check how long you think you still will be.
Okay, Chairperson, can you give me?
I'm not pushing you to unfairly cut you short.
Yeah.
Of course, on the 23rd, you can always continue, but I'm just checking and how much more time so that I can take a view now whether we should, what we should do.
I could finish by 1:15.
Okay, that's fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
All right. All right, Chairperson, then I go to the issue around the issue of the internal auditor that Ms. Williams queried that I changed the internal auditor that used to report to her, that I made a report, I made the chief internal auditor to report to me as the CEO. Chairperson, I must say that I was not only astounded, but I was overwhelmingly disappointed to hear Ms. Phumla Williams in year 2018 still challenging a corrective action taken in 2011 to ensure proper governance on an issue that was actually a transgression since the inception of GCIS. What are the facts, Chairperson? In terms of the internal audit framework released by National Treasury in March 2009, the Chief Audit Executive must report functionally to the Audit Committee and administratively to the Accounting Officer of the organization. This is what should be. So for me to come and change it in 2011 and Phumla challenging it in 2018, I'm astonished as to what actually is going on here. Now, Chairperson, we are pressed for time. I won't go through other prescripts that support this, except maybe just to mention also that National Treasury internal framework.
I just want to say, when on the 23rd, you could always fill in where you might not have filled in,
Okay.
if that's fine with you.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, Chairperson. I wanted to reserve 23rd for Mr. Malika's TNA and all others. I want to be ready for him for that.
Well,
so I want to clean this up now and
okay,
move.
no, just
Okay.
continue. Let's
Okay.
see. Let's see by 1:15 how the situation is.
Okay, all right, Chairperson. 1:15.
Yeah.
Now, Treasury Regulations paragraph 3.2.9 state thus, an internal audit function must report directly to the accounting officer, and it carries on like that. So, Chairperson, I want to say here that to have Phumla, Ms. Williams challenging that was really shocking for somebody that calls herself a governance person, as it were. I proceed, Chairperson, to Exhibit 4, but before I do that Exhibit 4, I just want to drop off Exhibit 3, which shows the length of service of the Bid Adjudication Committee, which I dismantled. They've got all the dates that are listed here, so the 10 years I'm talking about is not me thumb-sucking. I've got Exhibit number 3 here, RA3, That is very clear.
Okay, that's at page 29 of the bundle. Okay.
Right. Now, also then, Chairperson, I've got Exhibit 4, which are minutes of the GCIS MENCO that took place on the 1st of July, 2011.
That's Exhibit RA4 at page 32.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Now, that Exhibit RA4 that took place on 01 July, signed on the 22nd of July, has recorded the approval of the change in the reporting line of the Chief Audit Executive from Deputy CEO Corporate Services, which is Ms. Williams, to the Accounting Officer. Now, the point I'm raising here, Chairperson, is that it's not like I was just doing my own things without even taking them through processes. I took this thing to MENCO, and Ms. Williams, in the minutes here of RA4, was present in that MENCO, and the minutes which I was provided by GCIS recently, nothing in these minutes, Chairperson, show any objections from Ms. Williams. Maybe we would have dealt with this thing in 2011, but she keeps quiet until 2018, and she raises, and even the objection itself is irregular, even that objection. But be that as it may, just wanted to point out that on that RA4, this thing was done above board. I proceed then, Chairperson, to go to some of the desktop researches that we've done to look at other departments. We looked at public enterprise on Exhibit 5. They're doing the same thing, which is correct in terms of the auditor reporting to the CEO. Also looked at States SA on RA6, same thing. They're doing the right thing. Also looked at Public Service and Administration, Exhibit RA7, same thing, and so on. So one would have thought that maybe Ms. Williams would have been aware that what GCIS was doing was really out of order, really. So I really want to say, I really think her objection must really be dismissed, as it were. It really has no substance. Now, then we go to the issue of the Chief Directorate Media Buying that I also changed, that the reporting line to myself. And again, Chairperson, the main reason for changing this reporting line was that some senior key officials of media buying were also implicated in this irregular tender. So I was just doing a real operational cleanup. Also, the important thing is that this department was a department that was poised to deal with billions of rands of government media advertising spend. Now, the last thing you need is to have a department that has got to be dealing with these billions, but we have some dodgy activities in there. So I need to make sure that this thing is cleaned out, and people that don't have the right ethics on matters be removed and all that. So that's what I did, and so on, Chairperson. And I just think that even today, I continue to be happy that I did the right thing. And then, Chairperson, I then moved to point out that, you know, in the oral testimony of Ms. Williams, she created the impression that, that the chief director was reporting directly to me and not through, Now, Chairperson, on Exhibit RA8, I just show an organogram of the department. And I show here on that organogram, this division of media buying. On the extreme left is there Mr. Dipuku, the Chief Director, Advertising and Media Buying.
That is at page 39 on this, on the bundle.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, now, the point here, Chairperson, is that this was envisaged to be a branch of its own, this thing. So the impression given that there is this chief director that is undermining, so to speak, under deputy CEOs and so on, and reporting to the CEO, it was actually false and misleading, because this was envisaged to be, to be a separate branch of its own, because this was a division that was going to handle billions and billions of rands and so on. So it had to have its own focus, its own senior staff to deal with matters. So that is it, Chairperson, that I just thought that that answer was really misleading.
But I'm not sure that I follow. You mentioned that Ms. Williams' evidence created the impression that the chief director concerned was reporting directly to the DG or CEO, so to speak, skipping the level of deputy DG.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what you are saying. You're saying that the unit in which, or section in which the chief director was working was supposed to be on its own.
Yeah.
I just want you to explain that, whether on its own meant that it was not under any deputy DG, or on its, what it meant.
Yeah, there are two issues, Chairperson. You could have a chief director that is on branch A, and that chief director on branch A, for whatever reason, reports to the CEO. Now, in that case, one would understand why a person would be aggrieved, that the person that is my subordinate is reporting to the boss. Now, and this is the impression that was created, I'm arguing. And therefore, almost like they were undermined as deputies and CEOs and so on. When that was not the case, this chief directorate, the whole lot was moved to be a separate branch, as it were. We're in fact having an unfunded DDG position that we're still trying to get funding to have somebody at a DDG level to run this. But in the meantime, it was hived off on the side, and it was reporting to the CEO, not bypassing anybody. It had its own line. So there's no. So
I think your answer is she was factually correct. That is Ms. Williams, in saying that the particular chief director was reporting to the CEO. But what you are saying is there was justification for that.
No, I'm saying more, Chairperson.
Yes.
I'm not saying.
Or you are saying what was happening, namely that chief director reporting to the CEO was permissible under certain circumstances.
Yes,
yes, that's what you are saying.
That's what I'm saying.
You are not denying that the chief director was reporting directly to the CEO.
Yes.
You are simply saying there was nothing wrong with it.
Yes, there was nothing wrong with it. And also, I'm adding, Chairperson, that to create the impression that you are undermining anybody else is wrong, because it's not like you take a chief director that is currently on a particular line function and you make that person report to the CEO. You take the function and everybody gets explained that we're trying to build communication service agency on this side. So we're building this thing. The first building block is this chief directorate. And in the meantime, so that you guys, because this was a new function to be internalized at GCIS, all these years it was outsourced and so on. It was now brought in-house. So I wanted this in-house function to be fully fledged, as it were. So it was hived off on the side. It was reporting directly to the CEO. But the point I'm making, Chairperson, is that on its own, not only is it not wrong, but it's wrong to interpret it to be undermining any of the other three people that were other deputies that had their own functions, which are not this function. So that's the point I'm making. Okay. And by the way, I also submitted this RA8 as well, just to show, because this was on the annual report. It's not like it was some blue-eyed boy, so to speak, that was reporting. This was all above board. You can't have this thing on an official organogram when you are doing your shady things behind the scenes. This was right right there for everyone to see. The minister signed on this annual report, which had this thing, and nobody questioned. We presented this to Parliament as is. We had it was the fourth program, as it was. So it was destined to have its own deputy CEO, this thing. So that's the point I'm making. And I think RA9 makes the same point as well. It continued even on 2012-13 to be like that, as reflected on RA9, as it were. Now, Chairperson, I move on to some of the comments that Ms. Williams made on the annual report of 2012-13. And I want to read just quickly. I know I'm out of time, but very quickly. She says, in more than 10 years, I have been with GCIS, and this is all in the attachments here. In the more than 10 years that on exhibit RA10, it's all there. She says, in more than 10 years I have been with GCIS, the importance of functioning as a single unit, whether as a department, a government-wide communication system, or government itself, has never been clearer. Okay? So she acknowledges these things. Then she says, during the year under review, we restructured certain functions and sought to work better as a single unit rather than a coalition of disparate chief directorates. She then further says, I am proud to say we have mostly achieved what we set out to do, although a number of challenges remain. Now, this is the sentiment I left at GCIS Chairperson, and Ms. Williams writes this in July 2013. I'm long gone, but she still writes this thing. I don't know where the toxicity came in, but this is the last I left. Everybody was happy with the changes that were made. Everybody was happy. There was no issues. This is also, without preempting myself, the reason which I thought when she was getting something wrong, let me quickly correct her with that text, because I understood us to be working well together and all of that. I was surprised how she responded to that. But be that as it may, things happen. So I proceed then, Chairperson, to my exhibit RA11, that it is worth noting that on page 47 of the 2012-13 annual report, which is there on the pack as RA11, just some highlights of what did this division on its own being hived off, what did it actually achieve? 4 bullet points very quickly. One, that this communication service agency, which has been hived off, managed to bill something like 220 million in advertising placements with no audit comebacks for 24 national departments, 5 provincial departments, and 9 public entities under our roster. This was a well-oiled machine that we had put into place. We had some 200-odd media buying campaigns, and importantly, through you, Chairperson, Mr. Maleka, 30.5 million was saved through this exercise. I know that on the 23rd, Mr. Maleka wants to ask some questions, but I think we must note that with what we've done, we saved 30.5 million. All of this is in the attachment in the RA12 that RA11 that I'm referencing. So once again, I say all the changes that were made as Pumla had put them there yielded very, very positive positive outcomes as it were. And therefore the objections, once again, must really be rejected as baseless. On paragraph 5, on paragraph 15, Chairperson, of Ms. Williams' testimony, she talks to the issues of the new members, that almost like, the people that were replaced were almost like a substandard, so to speak, in her submission. I argue, it's my contention, Chairperson, that the pertinent details as regards the caliber of the newly appointed professionals have been left out, and that's creating a very misleading picture, as it were. I think actually Ms. Williams' demeanor during her oral testimony on the caliber of her own colleagues, that demeanor really sought to undermine their capacity, their professional competence and experience, which I found quite unfortunate and disturbing. I'm adding a chairperson that contrary also to Ms. Pumla Williams' false response to a direct question by the chair will remember that the chair asked a question that were all the members of this bid committee people from GCIS or from outside? And the answer was very direct that some were from outside. She mentioned people from labor, from transport, and so on. That was false, chairperson. Everybody, to the last person, were all employees of GCIS. Now, if by outside you mean they recently joined and so on, then it should have been clearer, because then it means then I'm also from outside. Then I don't know where you draw the line, but from where I sit, if you are one day at GCIS, you are an employee of GCIS, you can't have an answer where GCIS people, GCIS employees are deemed to be from outside the department, yet these people have got employee numbers of GCIS. These are employees of GCIS, all of them, as it were. In fact, of the 4 people that were there, 3 of them were on MENCO because they were chief directors, as it were. So for her to say some people were from outside was really false, truth of the matter. They're all employees of GCIS. Also, chairperson, part of the caliber of these people, these were not some junior officials. These were all senior people, director and above. And by the way, barring one of them, 3 of them had master's degrees, these people. Now, to then hold it against them that they don't have a 5-day training workshop of National Treasury. These are master's people, and so on. Surely, it's my contention, chairperson, that a person with a master's level qualification should be able to familiarize themselves with what a 5-day workshop would have given them. And the only thing that they really don't have is really a certificate of attendance. But these people have got the wherewithal to be able to do this. And again, chairperson, there was also, on that space, there was also a misleading response that Ms. Williams gave. The chairperson asked another direct question. Chairperson asked, did Mr. Manyi remove everybody? Chairperson would remember this. Did Mr. Manyi remove everybody? And she said, yes. What is the truth? The truth is that I removed the 4 people, and the impression created, and I think actually just to go back one step, chairperson, I think the substance of the question was to establish whether there was continuity, whether there was any institutional memory law preserved, or was it just the blind leading the blind with the new people. And the impression created was that, yeah, it's just 4 people and the blind were leading the blind. But the truth of the matter, chairperson, which is well explained in RA 12, exhibit RA 12, these people, yeah, it's all explained here in RA 12, the people that were members of the bid adjudication committee. On RA 12, you will see, chairperson, that about 3 of the people that were here are technical advisors and so on. So the issue of totaling scores and all of that technical work, there were at least 3 people that were part of the procurement team that were subject matter experts, as it were. But the impression created here was that it was all new people and what have you and all that. So I want to put it on record here that that was incorrect. And then towards the end, the chairperson, it's almost past. It's actually past. Towards the end, chairperson, I must also point out that paragraph 16, just to complete, chairperson, quickly, paragraph 16 that I made people report the bid adjudication processes, that everything must now report to me, must be signed off by me. It's actually not true. And I must add, the Chairperson, that even if that was to be true, it wouldn't be irregular to require the bid adjudication committee to have concurrence with the holder of the original power. In the public service, when you have the original power that you have delegated, you have the right to use that power nonetheless, as it were. But in this case, Chairperson, I had set a benchmark. I had said that 500, up to 500 million, up to 500,000, the bid adjudication committee can conclude. Anything above 500 must get concurrence, as it were. And this was because I had already seen what had happened. So I did not want any more surprises, as it is. And I think, Chairperson, one thing that the evidence leader, I was hoping would ask at the time, is that after Manyi had changed all this bid adjudication, all of this, what then happened, and all that, so that we can then see if after all of this change, was corruption enabled or was corruption stopped. And telling this now, Chair, that the system that I put in place there is really paying dividends. In fact, the chairperson that I left there is still the chairperson of that bid adjudication committee, is doing a great job. There's never been
Is he approaching 10 years as well?
That's it, Chairperson. Yeah, this is another problem. I think somebody needs to deal with that, Chairperson. I think it's been there too long as well, and all that. So Chairperson, as I close, I go to the SMS text that I sent, and as I do that, Chairperson, I want to ask the Chair to just look at RA9. RA9 is the organogram of the annual report of 2012-2013. Yeah, if you go to that, Chairperson, you will find what was happening. So just have it handy, Chairperson. So the point I want to make, Chairperson, is that, in conclusion, is that the evidence leader, Ms. Hoffman, in my view, was already done with the issues that pertained to me. Now, I quote her verbatim, where she says, I'm now going to move on to a new topic. This is what she says. It says, on page 5, Ms. Williams, we begin on paragraph 17, and she goes on, and all that. Now, and then she begins to ask her about what other changes were brought in, and so on. And then Ms. Williams started to go on about what the chief financial officer was bullying the procurement team and all that. At that point, and then fortunately she asked her again as to who was bullying the people. And she mentioned that it was Mr. Mzwanele Manyi and so on. At that point, I knew exactly that that's when I was not there. So I then, without understanding, Chairperson, I'm not a lawyer, without understanding the legalities, I thought, hey, my colleague is just forgotten the chronology. During break, in good faith, Chairperson, let me just call her to say, when you go back, can you just find a way of ensuring that you correct this chronology and so on. That's all I asked for. And I even asked Mr. Mabunda to say, Mr. Mabunda, we are not sitting very far from the evidence leader. Just get her to even ask the question whether was it Manyi. Because I just thought, Chairperson, we are here in this commission to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. So if I am seeing that something is wrong and I have an opportunity to correct it on real time, and the importance of this real time, Chairperson, is this. We've got media sitting at the back. Now, media takes everything real time, they tweet it, they do all kinds of things with it. And the importance of that is that other people make decisions based on what media is saying, One of the institutions that relies on media reports are the banks. The banks that are busy guarding their reputations, rightly so, take a lot of their input from the media. So I just thought I had a duty to make sure that the media must report that which is right, but at the same time, let's not create a thing here that Manyi did this, which he did not do. And so on.
You were not saying she must change what she believed was the truth.
Yeah.
You believed that she was mistaken,
Yeah.
and you wanted to help her to remember the exact position.
Yeah, correct, Chairperson. In fact, I wanted her to contextualize it so that, because she was talking about the epochs of various people that she was interacting with and so on. This was too close to when she was talking about me and so on. Now, she moves on to another era without saying the captain had changed and so on. So somebody sitting there must say, wow, this Manyi must have been something, you know. So I wanted the record to be set straight so that we don't create a wrong impression. That was all in good faith. And I point out, Chairperson, on this RA9, with this report, that it's written here that the CFO resigned in 2012 and was replaced by Mr. Momeka in April 2013. Now, I left in August 2012. So Mr. Momeka starts in 2013. So anything that has got Mr. Momeka in it, I have nothing to do with.
Would exclude you.
It excludes me. That's the only point I really was trying to say. Can she just make sure that the record is corrected?
Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think
you have covered.
I think I've covered what I needed to cover.
Okay, no, thank you. If there's anything that you haven't covered, I know that you said you wanted to reserve the 23rd for other matters that Mr. Malega mentioned. But if there is anything that you haven't covered, I will give you an opportunity on the 23rd to cover it.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson, I appreciate. But also, Chairperson, I must just make this point, that the questions, I'm ready for any questions, but I want to encourage Mr. Maleka to stick within the rules and regulations. And that is that for all the 3.3 issues that have been raised, we ruled 3.3 matters that have been raised before me. I've got one outstanding which I got last night, but all others are filed an affidavit. Now, on all those which an affidavit has been filed, I have not asked to cross-examine anyone. Now, I'm getting the sense that Mr. Maleka is itching to cross-examine me. Now, I may be wrong, but not that I'm running away from any cross-examination, but I will understand what is the basis of that when I have not asked for cross-examining anyone for that matter. But I'm happy to take anything fresh, but I must have clear allegations made and so on. But I don't want to get to a situation where people break the rules. Well,
you can rest assured that the bottom line will be that everybody will be treated fairly.
Thank you.
But I must just say that the mere fact that you may not have applied for leave to cross-examine anybody doesn't on its own preclude Mr. Malega or any member of the legal team to ask you questions on whatever they may want to ask you on. But the way the process happens is that you will have been aware of the matters on which you are implicated you will have been aware, and the legal team will not do anything to have a situation where you are here but you can't really give answers because you are taken by surprise.
Yeah.
So there will be fairness in that regard.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for coming to give your evidence. We will still see you on the 23rd, but thank you very much for coming forward. For now, you are excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Malega, I guess this is the time for us to adjourn. We will resume tomorrow for 2 or so applications that I need to deal with, but we will not have any witness giving evidence tomorrow. And what will happen on Friday will be announced tomorrow after I have dealt with the 2 applications. Okay, we adjourn.